Deadly Wi-Fi, Impossible Girls, Great Intelligences, here we go. The Bells of St. John. Boy, this is a strange beast, this thing. Partly because it is kicking off a strange segment of Doctor Who. Series 7 is such a weird thing, especially given how cleanly broken in half it is. It's a very strange experience to watch going through, because it really does feel like you're watching two completely separate series. The first half and the second. One does not really lead into the other, not all that much. But let's focus in specifically on this. So we have the introduction of, well, technically not, we saw her at the end of The Snowman, but we have the proper, full introduction of Clara and her beginning to actually join and travel with the Doctor. We have the return of the Great Intelligence. We have this whole concept of Wi-Fi that sucks your soul out. We have a lot of weirdness going on here. And there are bits of it that are interesting and work, but it's a lot piled on top of each other, and it doesn't quite pull together. I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think Moffat was trying to do too much. Because he was trying to bring us the new companion. Unfortunately, so many of the questions raised about that companion aren't getting addressed yet, and it makes her introduction feel a little bit off, because she's being brought into things almost as if it was just any other companion, but it's not, and we're not really dealing with that yet, which, that's weird. We are dealing with the Doctor coming out of a little bit of a form of semi-retirement. Okay, that's handled decently enough. We are dealing with the return of the Great Intelligence, and we're dealing with this very strange idea on Wi-Fi. And I think I get where that last one also doesn't quite work. Those are sort of the two main things that they're not the only things going on, but those are the two bits that suffer the most, I think, from the layering of elements, is the introduction of Clara and the Spoonhead's Wi-Fi soul thing story. It's not that either of those is an inherently bad idea. Maybe what they did with Clara was an inherently bad idea, but get back to that. But they both needed more room to breathe, and by being forced to share a single episode, share the time with each other, plus all the other stuff going on in this, they don't quite work and aren't really properly fleshed out. Let's kind of start with the Wi-Fi thing. I feel like I get where the initial kernel came from. It's not dissimilar to how a lot of really interesting Doctor Who stories in the modern era have been done, sort of taking this thing, well, how do we take this thing that people are familiar with and make it into something scary, something terrifying? They did it with statues, with Blink. They did it with just darkness and shadows in Silence of the Library. It was done with something as basic as basically a bus breaking down in Midnight. So that sort of thing has yielded positive results before. The idea of trying to make Wi-Fi scary doesn't quite work for a couple of reasons. The first is that the way in which it's made scary is a much bigger leap than I think a lot of the other stuff has been. Because you look at something like Blink, a statue moves. Whoa, that's immediate and visceral. You look at Silence in the Library. Human beings are already kind of built in to be scared of the dark anyway, so that's playing on primal fears, existing fears. Also similarly with statues, because statues can trigger the uncanny valley thing, like it looks so close to human, but it's not quite. Or with Midnight, you're stuck in a confined space and you can't see what's outside. That's a really easy fear to play off of. So all those things play off of primal fears. Having your soul sucked out of your body isn't really a primal universal fear. So what they decide to try and have the Wi-Fi do is immediately less effective than some of that other stuff, because it's a much more contrived sort of threat. It also doesn't help how slowly those heads turn around. Like, the image of the backside being hollowed out, that's actually pretty creepy. It's a decent visual. But for how slowly that thing turns around, my immediate question is always, why are they just standing there staring? Why aren't they running away? So, like, the first time it happens to Clara, okay, she's stunned by what she sees, and she's just like, okay, fine. But then it happens to her again, and she just sits there. And then it happens to the woman in the shard who's running the whole thing. And she just stays there going, no, run! Like, we don't know enough about how these work to understand why they can't just run. And so the fact that they don't comes off as very contrived and very stupid. There's also the thematically linked, but not logistically linked idea of hacking people and being able to tinker with them, raise and diminish paranoia, loyalty, and all obedience, all those sorts of things, which is, again, a very cool idea. And I can't help but flash back to my thoughts on Gridlock and the idea of the drugs for emotions. That is an idea that I am annoyed to see sort of tossed away as a background element in a story when it easily could have been the backbone of something and been much more fully integrated into a story. And instead, like I said, it's a background detail. It is somewhat linked in terms of, like, the theming of messing with people and toying with them and all of that. So, like, it's not completely detached. It's not as detached as the emotional drugs were in Gridlock. But it does have that same sort of thing where, like, this is an interesting enough idea that it should have been carrying its own story. That said, the final payoff at the end when they reset factory settings, which, first of all, that's a great just way to put it. It honestly did break my heart when that when that woman who was running it collapses and with this very small voice, where's my mom and dad? They said they'd be right back. Oh, that hurt. Because she did such a good job in both the vocal delivery and in her expression, in her eyes especially, attaining that sort of wide-eyed, I don't understand what's going on fear that children can do. And as a parent, that hit. It's a somewhat detached emotional beat. I think is very effective, but it's not really in service of anything. It's just kind of there. I'm not saying that it should have been dropped, but it doesn't feed into any kind of theming that's going on, and it doesn't have any particular impact. It's just a really, for me, emotionally affecting moment that doesn't really mean anything in terms of the overall story. I do like bringing back the Great Intelligence. It's funny watching this pretty much immediately after having seen The Snowmen, because it creates a very different experience, because in terms of the show itself, there was a fairly sizable gap of time between when The Snowmen aired and when this aired. But so the result is when we watched it as it aired, it was like, oh, he's back. Whereas you watch it straight through without that gap of time, it's like, oh, well, we just did him. So it's kind of funny. I'm not actually going to complain about that, because as aired, it felt a bit more momentous, because by sheer volume of time, we hadn't seen him in a while, but in terms of the last story that happened, we just seen him. But that only happens if you're binging through the way that I currently am. So that was just sort of an interesting thing for me to note. But Richard E. Grant is wonderful as the Great Intelligence. He's a great fit. And also this works for me very much thematically, even more so now that I've seen, because I hadn't at the time it originally aired, even more so now that I've seen some of the classic stuff with the Great Intelligence. I've seen Web of Fear. And so I have a better sense of him. And I feel this all fits, and this feels very consistent for what the Great Intelligence is, what it is trying to do. So I really do dig this. So coming off all of that, let's talk about the Doctor and Clara. So Matt Smith gets he gives actually a really good performance in this. He is intrigued by her. He is infuriated by what the Great Intelligence is doing. He has a very clever solution, sending the spoonhead that looks like him to the shard. That's a very cool solution to the problem. Very clever. It's nice to see the Doctor, instead of just techno-babbling his way through that. I mean, there's a little bit of that because he had to hack something that they made, so there's a little little bit of technological wizardry going on there, but his plan is outright clever, and it's nice to have that going on, which, I feel like doesn't always have it as much as I would like it to, but here it's present, and I like that a lot. But, okay, so here's the problems with this introduction of Clara. It works better rewatching it now, knowing what Clara is and who she is and how she's going to impact the Doctor's timeline later on. But having something work better once you already know what it is, that's not a positive, especially when you're dealing with a mystery, because the idea to watch it as it airs is to lure people into the mystery, but the mystery, when you don't know what's going on, is very convoluted. Because we're now on our third iteration of Clara. And the thing was, while there were some consistencies in terms of characterization, i.e. being clever, quick-witted, and things like that, there was a different feel to Oswin than there was to Governess Clara. So we've already kind of established that these people are somehow connected, but they also don't at least appear to realize they have any connection. And there do appear to be differences. Like the whole aspect of Governess Clara was this whole, she's actually more rough and tumble than she comes across. And she kind of hides that, which was not an element at play at all in Oswin. It's not to say she may not have had that going on, but we didn't see it. So we've already been introduced to the idea that these are distinct incarnations. But then Moffat makes the mistake of not actually doing a lot of specific characterization to the version of Clara we actually get. It's like he's counting on the fact of, oh, well, you already know Clara. You've seen her twice before. But the thing is, we don't really. At the time this aired, if you don't already know what's going on, we don't know enough about it to be able to safely assume, well, she's going to behave like the previous two, especially because there were already differences between the previous two. So Moffat made the mistake of giving so little time to directly characterize this companion. And again, I think because he was counting on us having seen her twice before, but he shouldn't have been counting on that because we didn't know how those connected to her, and neither does the Doctor. Now, I buy it that the Doctor kind of latches onto her in terms of, like, something weird's going on, let's poke it with a stick. That mentality that he has. I get that. But the problem is that aside from that, there really is no reason given for this connection to happen. And this is especially frustrating for me because I look back at something like, say, The 11th Hour. So much work went into characterizing Amy and giving us very tangible, believable reasons why Amy would travel with the Doctor. Moffat put so much work in there that he just didn't do with Clara. And I think that's kind of what happens when you have, I've made my complaints about mystery box style storytelling in Doctor Who before, but this is an added layer of when your mystery box is a person, an active character in the story, because one thing is going to give. Either it's going to be a very poorly integrated mystery because you're focusing on them as a character, or they're not going to be a properly developed, fully integrated, and realized character because you're focusing on them as a mystery element. And I think Moffat leaned more to that end of things. And it just makes things frustrating to watch because he's banking on the idea that we already know her. We don't. And this version of Clara is also already kind of changing. Anna is also mysterious. See, here's the thing. We have the mystery of why does this woman keep appearing, but we also don't even have a ton of information about this specific person. Even if we set aside the we've seen her alive and die twice before and just zoom in on her, we learn almost nothing about Clara. We know that she's not good with computers until she suddenly is because of the whole downloading an upgrade thing that happened to her. We know that she watches after some kids. She wants to travel but hasn't. And that's it. We don't really know how she ticks. We don't know how she works. We don't find out about how she processes the world the way that we did find that out about Rose, Martha, Donna, Amy. That's just not granted to us here. And it's a big part of why, right off the bat, Clara was a sticking point for me. She just isn't being given the foundation as a character that every other companion in the modern era had gotten up to this point. And it just makes her, on initial introduction into the story proper, way more shallow. Again, I will admit, this works better now that I've seen Clara's entire run and I understand her as a character. I am actually able to enjoy what is happening here more now, but that is a failing of the story because we didn't get any answers for episodes. And I honestly feel like she wasn't fully properly characterized until she had her time with Capaldi. So that's not it was good the whole time, I just didn't realize it because I didn't know where it was going. No, I consider that a flat out failing. The character didn't work until explained. If you're going to have a mystery character, you can have the reveal and the explanation recontextualize them, absolutely, but you still have to build them properly as a character in their own right in the first place, and this just doesn't. And it just makes things really frustrating. So that's Bells of St. John. Some interesting ideas, undercooked, some great moments, some clever moments, some which don't really feel like they properly connect to everything. The introduction of a companion who I have a lot of problems with, but I think even separate from my later issues with the character, I just think this introduction is not very good. The only thing that it's got going for it is the inherent charm of the actress. And she has that, and it helps. But it's not enough. Not for me. I also personally don't think she had the best chemistry with Matt Smith, especially compared to what the Doctor had with Amy. Now, I do think her chemistry with Capaldi was better, but we'll address that when we get there. Because, yes, I'll keep going through and redoing ones that I have seen but haven't rewatched in a while. But I have done reviews on before. Anyways, that'll wrap up this one. Have you rewatched this lately? What are your thoughts on it? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. A bunch of stuff to do down there as well. Like, subscribe, share this around. That helps me out immensely. It also helps if you consider supporting me on Patreon in any amount. That is incredibly helpful. Plus, there's other links besides, but you don't have to do any of it because at the end of the day, folks, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.